welcome to Sunday School this morning, boys and girls. And it is a very special Sunday morning, isn't it? What day is today?
Easter.
It's Easter, that's right. And I hope you've got lots of candy in your Easter basket. And if you need some more candy, then you can come for the Easter egg hunt after church today. So now we're going to have the true story of Easter, what Easter is all about. And it's really what Christianity and what our faith is all about too. So Jesus and his disciples, remember, had had a special dinner the night before. They had had what's called the Passover dinner. And Jesus knew at that time that his time on earth was getting very short. And he was about to save all the people from their sin, which is what he had come to do. So his disciples and he were walking together through the darkness. It had gotten dark that evening, and they went to a grove of olive trees, kind of an orchard where they grew olives. This was a place that was kind of close by, and then they frequently went there. And it was a garden with a funny name that's hard to pronounce. And I think we've practiced it before, but if we haven't, we'll practice it again this time. Say Gethsemane.
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 That's right, Gethsemane. And when they got there, Jesus told his disciples to wait in one part of the garden. And then he took 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John, a little further into another part of the garden. And he said to them, "My soul is grieved to death. Stay here and watch, will you?" And Jesus went a little further by himself, and he fell to the ground and he prayed. And he prayed alone for quite a while. I'll read the first one. This is what he prayed.
Abba, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will.
And then he went back to Peter, James, and John, his 3 closest friends that he told to wait with him, and he found them asleep. Can you believe it? They fell asleep when Jesus told them to wait. So he went again off by himself and prayed 2 more times. And both times when Jesus came back to Peter, James, and John, they were asleep again. They were so tired. Finally, Jesus told them to get up. "It's time," he said. "Here comes my betrayer." The betrayer, of course, was Judas, one of Jesus' very own disciples, one of the other 12 disciples. Suddenly, Judas was there, and he had brought a mob of soldiers armed with clubs and swords to come get Jesus. And what did Judas do to show the soldiers who Jesus was? He kissed him on the cheek, and he said, "Rabbi," which means teacher, but Judas was not showing how much he loved Jesus by that. Unfortunately, he was showing the soldiers who to arrest. But Jesus had expected this. So read the next part.
Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me, but the scriptures must be fulfilled.
So Jesus let them arrest him. He was fulfilling the scriptures by doing this. Scriptures that had been written hundreds of years before this happened. They came true that night. And then Jesus was taken to the high priest's house and then off to the house of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, who was going to do his trial to see what he was guilty of. And Pilate was amazed when he asked Jesus the questions in the trial. Jesus didn't answer or argue with him at all. And that was also fulfilling prophecy, by the way. And Pilate ended up wanting to set Jesus free. He didn't find Jesus guilty of anything, but the religious leaders were stirring up the crowds outside. And they began to scream, "Crucify him, crucify him." And Pilate was a little bit afraid of starting a riot, and so he gave in to them, and he sent Jesus to be crucified. So the soldiers led Jesus away, and then we find out what happens in the Bible, in the book of Mark. Remember, in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So we're in the book of Mark. in chapter 15, verses 17 through 19. The soldiers put a purple robe on Jesus. Then they twisted thorns together to make a crown. They placed it on his head, and they began to call out to him, "We honor you, O King of the Jews." Again and again they hit him on the head with a stick, and they spit on him. They fell on their knees and pretended to honor him. So they were really making fun of Jesus, weren't they?
That's mean.
But the soldiers let them do this because, again, this was also fulfilling prophecies that had been written hundreds of years before, that Jesus would let them do this. Then the soldiers made Jesus carry the heavy cross down to a place called Golgotha, or also we know it as Calvary. And they nailed Jesus by his hands and his feet to the cross, and they put that cross in the ground to hold it upright and make it stand up. And this was about 9 o'clock in the morning when this happened. And so for 3 hours, these soldiers were making fun of Jesus. The other crowds that were watching were making fun of Jesus. Even the religious leaders made fun of him. Let's read the next one.
Let this Christ, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe.
So they were taunting him. They were saying, "Come down. If you come down, we'll believe in you." But around noon, around 12 o'clock, something special happened. And let's look in, again, the book of Mark, chapter 15, verse 33. At noon, darkness covered the whole land, and it lasted for 3 hours. Does it usually get dark at noon?
No.
Not usually, so that was very unusual. And the next 3 hours, it was as dark as night, right in the middle of the day. And then at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jesus spoke from the cross. And what did he say?
My God, why have you forsaken me?"
Yeah, so Jesus was calling out to God. And this was a quote that he was speaking the scriptures from Psalm number 22. And this Psalm 22 is a description of the Messiah's death. And again, it was written hundreds of years before Jesus was even born. But Jesus used this to call out to God. And he called out loudly one last time, and then he died. His work of taking the punishment for our sins was done. His mission that he had come to earth for, obeying God and paying for our sin, was accomplished. And then one of Jesus' followers, a man named Joseph, took Jesus' body and laid it in a tomb, and they rolled a huge stone in front of the tomb to block it off. And then the next day was the Sabbath day, when all of the Jewish people rested. So they didn't do anything on that day, and no one went to the tomb. But the day after the Sabbath, very early, on Sunday morning, a few of the women who were Jesus' friends took spices to the tomb because they wanted to do the embalming of the body, the rituals for the burial. So let's look in the book of Mark again, chapter 16, verses 4 and 5. Then they looked up and saw that the stone had been rolled away. The stone was very large, and they entered the tomb. As they did, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe. He was sitting on the right side, and they were very alarmed. So the women, so read this part.
He has risen. He's not here.
Yeah, that angel. They saw the angel, and this is what the angel said, that Jesus was risen. He was alive. And so the women really didn't know what to think. It's not every day that somebody comes back to life, right? This was very special. But the angel told them he was alive, and he told them not to be afraid, but they were still pretty afraid, and they ran away. But one of the women, Mary Magdalene, actually saw and talked to Jesus that morning, and she ran to tell the other disciples that he was alive. But sadly, they didn't believe her yet. This was too incredible. And later that day, Jesus showed himself to two more friends who were walking on the road to Emmaus. And they came and told the disciples too that Jesus was alive. But still, they didn't really quite believe it. And finally, that evening, Jesus came to the room where the disciples were. And now they could see Jesus. And they had to believe that he had come back to life, that he had taken the punishment for our sin, and he had overcome death. And now Jesus was alive forever, and that was the most fantastic thing that had ever happened. So remember, all of the wrong things that we do are called sin, and it's this sin that keeps us from being close to God where he wants us. But God loved us so much that he sent his son, his very own son, Jesus, to come to earth and make a way to forgive us from that sin so that we could be with God forever. Jesus died to pay the price for all of those wrong things that we do. And then he came back to life again. And that's what we celebrate on Easter. And I hope that you celebrate that as well. And if you believe in Jesus and trust him, then you are going to be part of his family forever. All right, I hope you have a great Easter Sunday and the rest of the week. And we'll see you back again next week to talk some more about Jesus.